He stood on the battlefield and looked at what he had done. 100,000 people dead, 150,000 taken as prisoners, countless more, displaced, starving, wandering through the ruins of what had been their homes. He had won. The kingdom of Kalinga was his, the last great independent kingdom, standing between him and total dominion over the Indian subcontinent. He had everything. And standing there, surrounded by the dead, breathing the smoke of burning villages, something inside him broke. His name was Ashoka, emperor of the Mauryan Empire, grandson of Chandragupta. The boy Chanakya had turned into an emperor. He had spent his reign doing exactly what emperors do, conquering, expanding, crushing. He was, by every measure, the most powerful man alive. And in 261 BC, on the battlefield of Kalinga, he became a completely different person. What happened to Ashoka is one of the most extraordinary transformations in the history of human power. Not a story of a man who found religion and became gentle, but the story of a man who looked honestly at himself, at what power had made him, at what conquest actually costs, at the gap between what he had been taught a great king should be and what a great king actually does, and chose to change. Ashoka was born around 304 BC, the son of Emperor Bindusara and a relatively minor queen. He was not supposed to be emperor. There were older brothers, more legitimate heirs, who stood between him and the throne. What happened to those brothers is disputed. Some accounts say Ashoka had them killed. Others say they died in battle, or in the political chaos that followed his father's death. What is certain is this: Ashoka was not a gentle man before Kalinga. Ancient texts describe him as fierce, ruthless, and feared. Some call him Chandashoka, Ashoka the Fierce. He had built his empire the way empires are built, with armies, with violence, with the calculated willingness to destroy anyone who stood in his way. Kalinga was simply the next campaign, the next kingdom to be absorbed, the next entry in a long list of military victories. But Kalinga was different, because for the first time, Ashoka did not simply record the victory and move on. He stopped, he looked, he felt. In his own words, inscribed on rocks and pillars across his empire, in what are now called the Edicts of Ashoka, he wrote, 100,000 people were killed, and many times that number perished. Afterwards, now that Kalinga was annexed, the beloved of the gods, very earnestly practiced Dhamma, desired Dhamma, and taught Dhamma. Dhamma, the Pali word for the Buddha's teachings, for righteous conduct, for compassionate action, for the idea that how you treat others is the true measure of power. Ashoka had encountered Buddhism before Kalinga, but it was Kalinga that made it real.
I speak to you not as your conqueror, but as a follower of Dhamma. True victory is won by love. Let this be our law forever.
He did not just change his personal beliefs, he changed his policy. He gave up conquest permanently. The Mauryan Empire at its height was the largest empire India had ever seen, stretching from Afghanistan in the west to Bengal in the east, from the Himalayas in the north to the edges of Tamil Nadu in the south. Ashoka stopped expanding it, not because he was weak, not because he had run out of armies, but because he had decided that conquest was not what greatness looked like. He replaced the ideology of conquest with what he called Dhamma Vijaya, victory through righteousness. The idea that the most powerful thing a ruler can do is not to conquer neighboring kingdoms, but to conquer ignorance, injustice, and cruelty within his own. What followed was one of the most remarkable reigns in the history of any civilization. Ashoka built hospitals, not just for people, for animals. He planted trees along roads to provide shade for travelers. He dug wells so that no one would go thirsty. He built rest houses for merchants and pilgrims. He appointed officers called Dhamma Mahamadas, ministers of righteousness, whose sole job was to travel the empire and ensure that people were being treated justly. He issued edicts carved into rock faces and polished stone pillars at the edges of his empire, proclaiming that all his subjects, regardless of religion, caste, or origin, deserved equal protection under the law.
What I desire for my own children, and I desire their welfare and happiness. This was written in the 3rd century BC, across the largest empire in Indian history.
It reads like the preamble to a modern constitution. He promoted religious tolerance in an age when religious intolerance was the default condition of every empire. He did not impose Buddhism on his subjects. He practiced it himself and invited others to examine its teachings. His edicts explicitly state that he respected all religious sects, Brahmins, Jains, Ajivikas, Greeks, and that the essence of all religion, properly understood, was the same: compassion, self-restraint, and the honest examination of one's own conduct. He sent his own son and daughter as missionaries to Sri Lanka, where Theravada Buddhism took root and still flourishes today. He sent missions to Egypt, to Syria, to Macedonia, to Cyrene. The Buddhist world, as it exists today, across Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, East Asia, owes much of its spread to Ashoka. And yet, history is never simple. The same Ashoka, who preached compassion, never fully dismantled the apparatus of empire. The Mauryan state was still a state, with prisons, with capital punishment, with the machinery of control that all empires require. He softened it, he reformed it, he introduced a 3-day delay between sentencing and execution so that prisoners could prepare, appeal, or say goodbye to their families. But he did not abolish it. Ashoka was a man who changed profoundly, but he was still a man, embedded in his time, his culture, his role. The gap between the ideal and the achievable is the defining tension of every life that tries to be good while wielding power. Ashoka felt that tension more consciously than almost anyone in history, and he kept trying. He died around 232 BC. After his death, the Mauryan Empire fragmented. His successors lacked his vision. Within 50 years, the greatest empire India had ever seen was gone. For nearly 2,000 years, Ashoka himself was almost forgotten. The edicts remained, carved in stone, scattered across the subcontinent, but no one could read them. The script had been lost. In 1837, a British scholar named James Prinsep deciphered the ancient Brahmi script and read Ashoka's words for the first time in 2 millennia. What he found astonished him. An ancient Indian emperor writing in the 3rd century BC about justice, compassion, religious tolerance, animal welfare, and the duty of the powerful to serve the weak. The lion capital of Ashoka, the statue that sat atop his pillars, was adopted as the national emblem of independent India in 1950. The Ashoka Chakra, the wheel of Dhamma, sits at the center of the Indian national flag. The most powerful man in ancient India is still present in the most watched flag in the modern world. What does Ashoka teach us? That transformation is possible, even for the most powerful, even for the most violent, even for those who have done terrible things. The question is not, have you been perfect? The question is, when you see clearly what your actions have cost, are you willing to change? Ashoka saw clearly, on a battlefield in Kalinga, surrounded by 100,000 dead. And he changed. Not perfectly, not completely, but genuinely, publicly, permanently. He was Chandashoka, Ashoka the Fierce, when he began. He became Dhammashoka, Ashoka the Righteous, before he ended. The same man, two completely different examined lives. Subscribe to the Examined Lives. Next week, the man who looked at everything human beings believed about themselves and said, "You are wrong, all of it." Charles Darwin, The Idea Too Dangerous to Publish. See you then.